Thank you. Hey, thank you all so much. As Rachel said, we are Atlantis Quartet. We're really happy to be here. Again, that's Brandon Wozniak on saxophone, Chris Bates on bass, Pete Hennig on drums. My name's Zach. We formed as a band without Chris, with a different bass player, actually one of the faculty here at the school, back in 2006. And at the time, we were all, with the exception of Pete, we were all kind of transplants here and didn't know a lot of people. I guess. And Pete is a transplant. He had just been here a little longer. So when it started, we were really playing this like modern jazz music for nobody. Ourselves, exactly. And one of the things we want to talk about today is just kind of forging that bond with people that you collaborate with and sticking together and continuing to do things, because in our case at least it did pay off after a few years of doing that, and we just stayed true to what we thought was good music, and eventually people started noticing it, so it was good. We've got 3 albums out, gotten some national praise on them. We got them over here. Actually, we thought we would just sell them for $5 to you guys today, because we know most of you were probably broke.
By the
You're
way,
musicians
it's
and
the
in
new
college.
CD fund goes to our going for the new record.
Yeah, so let us know if you want one of those. We really, though, want to answer your questions. So does anybody have any questions to start out with? And we've done these before. We know you're shy, but every question is good.
Yeah, man. What was the name of that song you just played?
Stargazer, Shoegazer. I wrote it because my wife likes indie rock better than jazz. So I thought I'd kind of try and split the difference. Anything else? Come on, there we go.
So, I mean, how does the process of writing one of your songs work? Like, you just come up with, I've got this one idea with this little bass line, and then we'll just make up the rest of it because we're jazz guys, or do you have a general idea of where you want the song to go?
That's a great question. Pete, you want to take that?
We all kind of individually write for the band. So I might be at home and I come up with an idea on the piano, which I'm not very good at playing, but I'll write it down and I'll bring it to these guys. Sometimes as a whole tune, sometimes it might just be like a song fragment. But what we've kind of found out, what works for us, is to kind of come to the table with a pretty much finished piece of music. And we still dissect it quite a bit from there. So that last tune was actually Zach's song, but he kind of brought it in as a framework. All the notes were there and the chords were there, but we kind of figured out the form, how we wanted it to feel, tempo, and groove. We sort of all established that in a few rehearsals. So that's kind of been how we've been approaching it lately.
And to that end, on that last one, a lot of the stuff we play will solo for quite a while on and improvise. So those of you not familiar with jazz per se, there's kind of this foundational structure, and then after the melodic statement, typically, then the different players improvise on it. And with this song, we decided that we would keep the solos really short to kind of keep it in more of a pop kind of framework.
What do you think finally bridged the gap for you guys from just playing music that you like and kind of entertaining yourselves to getting all those awards and finding out and getting a crowd? Was it just kind of keeping with it?
Well, around the time that I joined the band, these guys had started to make a name for themselves, and I actually discovered them just because other guys that I know were saying dude, you should go check out this band because I think you dig it. And so I went and listened to them, and then circumstances happened, and I ended up in the band, so that's cool. And it worked out for everybody in a different way because we just started playing all the time. We still have on our schedules every Monday is our rehearsals time, and so it's just sort of that idea that after a while, you're either going to get noticed by a lot of people or you're not, and so it wasn't really anything that we consciously did. In fact, the city pages, I wouldn't say we exclusively ignored them in our promo, but we went so far as to just, because it's really hard to get press if you're not a rock or hip hop act in that paper right now, and that's just their aesthetic, and so you can't we can't push against that and be like mad about that. We just have to let it go. But they have one guy there who writes really great reviews. His name is Rick Mason, and he got a hold of our record and he dug it and he put a review of Animal Progress in the paper. And then from there, we just kept doing our thing, and he has been keeping track of us, and so he kind of keyed in on us and gave us that award in 2011 for the best jazz artist. And we were in New York waiting to play in Brooklyn at this club, and we were all sitting in the van, and Brandon's like, dude, check this out. We're all on Facebook, right, with our rectangles, and you guys all have rectangles too. And anyway, so it was just that fascinating thing where we all of a sudden we were getting awards just for being ourselves without really, having worked towards that goal. It was always a goal to play the best music that we could, and I think just through that, that's really what has done it for us.
Another thing I think is that, in this day and age, making CDs becomes less and less important, seemingly, right? Not a lot of people buy them. You can get free music all over the place, and it's expensive to make still, to actually produce it. But I think that if you want to progress in the eyes of the public, in the eyes of the press and stuff, it's really important to make an album. We did an album before Chris was in the band, which helped us start getting more gigs in other places and a few other people to know who we were. And then when we did our second album, Animal Progress, with Chris, that's really kind of what I think helped do what you were saying, kind of take it to that next level. As far as the music, we kind of kept doing the same thing we were doing, but it's really important, I think, to make those albums or releases or whatever to kind of get people to think about what's going on with your music. Yeah.
What were some of the venues and spaces that you started out playing, and how has that changed over time to the place that you're playing now?
Well, we started out playing at a place called Jitters, which is now called Honey.
Yeah.
And they didn't really pay a lot of money, so after a while we were like, we'll see ya. Which is a good thing. It's good to play those gigs that, don't pay a lot at first to get some exposure maybe, but don't do it too long because then you're just getting taken advantage of, okay? That goes for everybody, rock musicians, folk, whatever you do, just don't do it too long because you're just hurting the entire music industry in that case. So we were playing there, and yeah, we would play the Times above that, Times Cafe or whatever it was called.
Yep,
Where else
yeah.
did we play, Pete?
There's the Hat Trick Lounge a couple of times, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. And
Dakota Late Night when it used to be more jazz. Now it's
Yep.
more like an R&B thing. But
what was it called? The Fusion Cafe when that was open, right? There used to be the French Press.
oh, that was our first our
Yep.
first gig. Yeah.
So yeah, we were basically just trying to, get in anywhere that would take us and try to play and get our music heard because, that's the best way to kind of generate a following. So after a while, yeah, we sort of could hand-pick the gigs that we decided would be the best for us. And Jitters, where we were playing every Thursday, was great to use as kind of a punching bag to work out all of our ideas, Like we'd have some really great nights there and, coming away from the gig just feeling fantastic. And other nights, we might try a new tune or a new concept and it wouldn't quite work, so to speak. But those kind of experiences I think you can only get from playing live. So just to kind of jump on what Zach said, it was great for us, but we realized after a few months that it was only going to get us that far, and it was time to move ahead.
So now we mostly play at the Artist Quarter. We'll do a weekend there every 2, 3, 4 months, something like that. And then we're there at the very end of November, and it's like November 30, December 1. And then we do the Dakota, the evenings now. So we're there this Wednesday at 7. And then we do some other things. Last night we played at the Minnesota Zoo's new Live on Stage series, like an indoor concert series they're doing. And then a week or so ago we played at Jazz at Studio Z, which is a nonprofit kind of jazz workshop and concert series. So we actually presented on a few topics, and then we did a concert there. So that's the second Saturday of every month down in Lower Town. So little things like that, but you know, it's good. We don't play a ton, probably on average a gig or two a month in town here, and then we try to get out here and there to do a little bit of touring, but you know, it's hard these days. So.
Yeah, and that was what I was going to say, is that when I'm in a bunch of bands, and this band is one of the more successful ones right now, and every one of those bands does this thing. It's just trial by fire. You do all of the kind of what you might think, oh, why would I go to this coffee shop and play for no money, or play at the Acadia for a 4-band bill in the middle of 3 heavy metal bands when you're a jazz band? Because those guys dig music, right? Like everybody who plays music likes other musicians usually. If you don't, then maybe you're not doing the right thing. But greater point being that, you know, we just did all these different things, and then we had a chance to grow as a band. Like, that's how you get good. Like, you got to play gigs. You can't just rehearse, because you got to get your stuff in front of people. You got to get people, you have to get that feedback from an audience. And so now we're in this thing where we can select a little bit more about when we play, and that maximizes the impact of every show as well. But we still rehearse every week, or almost every week. I mean, even though we're not playing, we're still playing as a band for ourselves and working on our tunes and developing the composition part of what we do. So it's sort of you just got to do all of those things, and yes, at some point, hopefully, you get to a point where you can subsist and make a living doing it. I make a living doing it because I'm in 10 bands, you know. I couldn't do this and only play in Atlantis Quartet and be just exclusively a bass player. I'm lucky because I play the bass, and a lot of people need the bass. So anyway, I'm getting a little off track, but this is the whole idea, is just that there's this flow of how these things work, and you just got to get out there and get the experience. And there's no substitute for playing a bad gig with your best friends and you're going like, what the heck just happened there? Why did that chorus fall apart? Or why did that happen? Or playing that great gig when you look at each other and you're like, I don't know, magic's happening right now. Everything's hooked up. Everyone's synced up. Everyone's reacting to one another and playing their parts great, or improvising great, or whatever the context of your music. It's irrelevant. It's just doing it and getting out there. So, anybody else got anything?
I was wondering, you said that last song got your inspiration from a pop framework. I was wondering, like, how you guys take inspiration from other music. It's not just jazz, both as individuals and as a band.
Brandon?
Yeah, I think we all listen to all kinds of music, and just because we play primarily jazz music, we all have varied influences, and we try to really take those and kind of incorporate them into what we do. You know, I don't know that I actually sit down and write a tune and think, for me personally, I'm going to try to get a pop vibe on something. I usually will just try to pick out a melody, and sometimes it goes to that area, and sometimes you can kind of manipulate it into something later on if you want to, But, that's kind of the gist of how I would do it.
Yeah, in the greater jazz genre now, there are so many subgenres that pull from all these things, thanks to like the fusion era in the 70s and the world music stuff that was part of that. So, there's a lot of different things that we can draw from. In fact, maybe we'll hold the questions for a second and play this next tune.
Yeah.
And that will kind of demonstrate. You want to set it up, Pete? A-Crux?
Oh, I thought we were doing hidden place.
Oh, okay, yeah.
This is we called an audible just now, and so this is one of my tunes called "The Hidden Place." And actually, to directly answer your question regarding this tune, this comes from like country and gospel, and I've been playing in these traditional country bands where I'm playing like Route 5 the whole night and just digging into the meat and potatoes bass. And this song just came out because I've been playing and listening to a lot of that. But now we're going to improvise over it, and we have this beautiful little thing. So again, this is another tune that kind of reflects the diversity of music and how you can bring it to an improvised setting, or any setting, really. So.
Okay. Any questions from there?
Well, I wanted to ask, when you're in 10 different bands, what's your advice for managing that? 'Cause that seems to be kind of a trend, having to be in multiple bands. What advice would you give us?
Get a good calendar. And yeah, time management. I mean, I have 2 kids, you know, things like that. So I got a lot on my plate. And yeah, it's just about managing all of that. And also being, trying to be as prepared as you can for every situation. So that means like memorizing everything and taking time to say, oh, here's this brand new piece that Pete brought, and it's really hard, and I better practice this thing a few times before we play next, so that I've almost got it memorized. Actually, I'm pretty proud of myself, because when I joined the band, it was like, here's this book. It's like 27 songs, and you're like, oh shit, I got to memorize all this, right? And then, so all these things just happen, and so I do a lot of prep work on my own. You know, I'm even sometimes like after a gig, oh, it's 1 o'clock, I'm wired. You know how you get after a gig, you're like fired up. Rather than, you know, doing some of the things that other people might do, I pick up my electric bass and I put my headphones on and I practice songs, you know, because I know that that's when I have time to do it. My kids get up at 7:30 a.m. and I'm like, hey, I'm a dad now. And I don't have that luxury all the time of the time. Now my daughter's actually in kindergarten this year, so things are getting a lot better for me. Just as far as being able to have the time to do that stuff. But for the last 5 years, it's been tough. I've been taking care of her and balancing all of this with that. So life happens, so do the work now, right? Hopefully none of you have kids. If you're going to be in an R&B band, or if you're going to be, I mean, maybe you do, it's cool. But I'm not digging a hole here. But, you know, just recognize where you're at and look at this time as the time to take the bull by the horns and memorize. If you're a bass player, memorize the Motown catalog, memorize the Earth, Wind, and catalog, you know, just do the work to get the tunes under your fingers, so if somebody calls something, you're like, oh yeah, I know that. Or if you're a jazz player and that's what you want to do, then get into the standards, get into learning those things, get into the repertoire that you need to do. And then each band then therefore becomes easier because you have this backlog of stuff and you're like, oh, that sounds kind of like these 3 songs that I already know. So in my brain, I can just go and snip, cut, and paste. Here's a chorus from this that's the same as this song, and here's this that's the same as that. And suddenly things start to make more sense rather than feeling like you're overwhelmed with a, you know, pile of stuff that you have to learn. That's how I deal with it, so.
I think another thing, Chris talked about all these different repertoires with the different bands, and time management includes knowing that you've got this gig coming up this week and making sure that you kind of touch on all that stuff. You know, the material that we do in this band, a lot of it's kind of complicated, and if I don't at least look over a few things, then it can be a little rough. You know, so if there's an Atlantis gig coming up, I make sure that I spend a morning or afternoon just kind of going through that stuff. And tonight I'm playing with a drummer who's got like some of his own tunes, so I'm going to spend a little time this afternoon going over that stuff. And on Sundays, Pete and I play in a group that just does standards, and so that's kind of the day when I'm like, all right, I can just work on playing some like kind of traditional jazz ideas and some of those tunes. So managing your repertoire practice, I think, is really important when you're in a lot of bands. Yeah.
Who's business guy?
These guys help out, though.
We do share the responsibilities.
Increasingly so. Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, that's my MO. You got a question about that? Not enough, really. That stuff's out there, but I have not spent the time to really like research it. So if anybody has any ideas out here, I know you guys are taking those classes. Come talk to me. Let us know. You know, I've been fortunate to have a couple things just picked up by people who knew of the fact that I was playing music and knew somebody, and so some documentary kind of stuff like that. But unfortunately, this group hasn't really had anything, although it would be nice to get something like that. But, you know, selling albums, that's kind of the main thing that we focus on, and playing, getting gigs. So, somebody was talking about different influences a minute ago, and I wanted to talk about this tune that Pete wrote recently, because it kind of has some like world influences, I feel like, and wanted to see what you were thinking about. It's in an odd time signature, and see what you were thinking about when you wrote that.
Oh boy. This is one of the songs that we're about to play. It's one of the songs that I wrote at the piano, and if any of you play piano, I can say that the beginning bass line and melody line, they're all on the black keys of the piano, because that was easy for me to play. And I was just practicing, you know, scales and stuff, and this pattern just kind of rolled off my fingers, and I thought to myself, well, that sounds kind of interesting, and investigated a little bit more, and I'm like, oh, it's actually in 9/4. So instead of changing it to 4/4 and making it something, you know, pop-oriented, I'm like, well, let's explore this a little bit. So I wrote a melody around it, and I kept it in 9/4, and brought it to the guys here, and we sort of gave it our Atlantis treatment. So I guess when I'm writing, I don't try to put up boundaries for myself. You know, sometimes I might hear a song, and I'm like, oh, I really like the way that song sounds. I want to write something like that. But most of the time, when I'm just sitting down with an idea, I think one of the worst things that you can do, for me to do, is to just say, I don't like that, or that's not good enough, or I don't think that this is going to sound good. You know, just do it. Get in the practice of writing. You know, if you're writing a lot of music, it's just like practicing, right? Sometimes you sit down to practice your instrument, or, you know, you do vocal warm-ups or whatever, and it's not your day, you know. It's that way when you're writing, too. I think if you just write without being critical in the moment, and then you come back to it later, you'll actually be pretty surprised. You might be really pleased with what you came up with. So I'm pretty happy with this tune. I titled it A Crux, and it's a little solar system. I don't know where that came from.